Have you ever heard of a war where the enemy didn't carry guns, didn't wear uniforms, and didn't even know they were fighting? A war where the proud Australian army marched into battle, not against another nation, but against birds. Yes, birds. This isn't a joke, and it's not a forgotten comedy skit. This is a true story from 1932, a bizarre moment in history when men with machine guns fought a war against emus. And the strangest part? The birds won. Picture it. The dry, endless plains of Western Australia in the early 1930s. The Great Depression had left scars across the world, and here in Australia it was the farmers who bore the heaviest weight. Many of them were war veterans, men who had fought in the trenches of World War I and returned home to find that instead of medals bringing them prosperity, they were given struggling farmland on the edges of the outback. The land was poor, the climate harsh, and the promise of a better life felt more like a cruel trick. These men knew the smell of gunpowder and the sound of battle, but now their battle was against dust storms, failing crops, and an economy that seemed to offer them no mercy. And then came the emus. They appeared like a living tide on the horizon, thousands upon thousands of tall grey birds, their long necks swaying, their beady eyes scanning the fields. To the unprepared farmers, it must have looked like some biblical plague. Emus are not small creatures. Standing up to 2 meters tall, weighing over 40 kilograms, they are fast, strong, and relentless. When food is scarce in the dry interior, they move together in massive flocks, searching for survival. And in 1932, survival meant marching straight into the newly planted wheat fields of the desperate Australian farmers. Imagine watching the fields you had ploughed with your own hands vanish under the feet of these invaders. In days, crops were flattened, eaten, or torn up. Fences, carefully built to keep livestock safe, were knocked down by the sheer force of the birds charging through. Waterholes meant to save humans and animals through the burning summer were drained by thirsty emus. For the farmers, it wasn't just a nuisance, it was devastation. Their livelihoods, already fragile, were being ripped apart. So they cried out for help. Letters were sent.
Pleas were made.
The government could not ignore them. After all, these weren't just farmers. Many were veterans, men who had once carried rifles for their country. Now they demanded that their country stand by them in return. The government's response was as strange as the problem itself. If the birds behaved like an invading army, then the army would be sent to fight them. In November of 1932, Major G.P.W. Meredith was dispatched to the West Australian countryside, accompanied by soldiers of the Royal Australian Artillery. They did not come with traps or nets. They came with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The arrival of the soldiers must have filled the farmers with hope. Finally, someone was going to take this nightmare seriously. Finally, there was a chance to protect the land. The men wore uniforms, the guns gleamed in the sun, and the strategy seemed simple. Corral the birds into groups, cut them off, and bring them down with concentrated firepower. The farmers imagined the fields would soon be quiet again, the emus gone, the wheat safe. But reality was about to turn their hope into ridicule. The first engagement took place near Campion. Over 1,000 emus were spotted grazing, tall shapes against the flat horizon. The soldiers crept into position, set up the heavy Lewis gun, loaded the first drum of ammunition, and prepared to unleash hell. At Major Meredith's order, the trigger was pulled, and a roar of gunfire shattered the still air. Dust rose, feathers flew, and the emus ran. They didn't charge. They didn't freeze. They scattered with astonishing speed, breaking into small groups, zigzagging across the scrub, sprinting at nearly 50 kilometers per hour. The machine gun, designed to mow down waves of enemy soldiers in the trenches of Europe, suddenly looked useless. The soldiers adjusted, fired again, but the birds had vanished, melting into the land as if they had rehearsed this escape 1,000 times. When the dust settled, only a handful of emus lay on the ground. Hundreds more had slipped away, untouched. The soldiers tried again the next day, attempting to ambush a smaller group near a dam. This time they waited until the birds were close to water, hoping to trap them. Once again the machine guns roared. But the jammed weapon betrayed them, stopping after only a few shots. By the time it was cleared, the emus had sprinted out of range. It became clear very quickly that this was no ordinary pest problem. The emus were fast, unpredictable, and seemed almost uncannily aware of the soldiers' movements. Farmers swore they saw the birds working in teams, one standing tall like a lookout while others fed, ready to scatter at the first sign of danger. Major Meredith himself later said that the emus displayed remarkable maneuvering tactics and admitted, almost in awe, that they could face machine gun fire and still escape with shocking efficiency. One particularly absurd attempt saw the soldiers mount a Lewis gun on the back of a truck. The plan was simple: chase the birds across the fields and cut them down as they fled. But the land was too rough, the truck too slow, and the gunner too shaken by the bouncing ride to aim. As the truck rattled over rocks and ditches, the emus sprinted ahead, leaving the soldiers coughing in clouds of dust. Once again, the birds had the last laugh. Word of the campaign spread quickly. Journalists seized on the story, reporting it with equal parts humor and disbelief. "Emus invincible!" screamed the headlines. "Army defeated by birds!" Cartoonists sketched soldiers fleeing in panic as towering emus chased them with bayonets. The idea that trained soldiers armed with modern weaponry could fail so miserably against birds became a national joke. The farmers, however, weren't laughing. Their crops were still being torn apart, and their frustration turned to embarrassment as the press mocked their plight. After weeks of skirmishes, the results were humiliating. Nearly 10,000 rounds of ammunition had been fired, and yet the estimated number of kills was fewer than 1,000. That meant each emu had taken, on average, 10 bullets to bring down, if they were brought down at all. For every bird that fell, dozens more slipped into the scrub unharmed. The war had become a farce. By December, the government quietly admitted defeat. The soldiers packed up their weapons, withdrew from the fields, and left the farmers to face the birds alone. The Great Emu War was officially over, and the winners were not the men in uniform, they were the emus. In the aftermath, the government switched tactics. Instead of sending soldiers, they offered bounty payments to local hunters. This proved more effective. Hunters, moving silently and patiently, were able to reduce the numbers far more efficiently than soldiers with noisy, clumsy guns. But by then, the damage to the government's reputation was done. The story had already taken root, growing into legend. Over the years, the tale of the Emu War has been retold countless times, often with a mix of disbelief and laughter. It has become part of Australia's strange folklore, a story that blurs the line between tragedy and comedy. On the surface, it's funny, an army humiliated by birds, but underneath it's a reminder of the desperation of farmers, the failures of government policy, and the unpredictability of nature. Major Meredith, reflecting years later, remarked that if the emus had been able to bear arms, they would have made formidable enemies. It was said half in jest, but there was truth in it. The birds had shown speed, coordination, and resilience that no one had expected. Against them, the soldiers had looked clumsy, slow, and foolish. And the emus? They continued to thrive. Today, they remain one of Australia's most iconic animals, roaming the land as if nothing had ever happened. Tourists laugh at the story, children learn about it in school, and history books include it as one of the strangest wars ever fought. But for a moment in 1932, under the scorching sun of Western Australia, it was no laughing matter. It was war, real, desperate war. Gun barrels smoked, machine guns rattled, men shouted orders, and still the birds ran free, kicking up dust with every stride. It was the sound of nature refusing to bow. It was the absurdity of modern weapons, humbled by creatures that couldn't even fly. The Great Emu War remains, to this day, one of history's strangest battles. And if there is a lesson to be learned, perhaps it is this: never underestimate nature. For all our machines, our armies, and our pride, sometimes the simplest creatures can outwit us. Sometimes the most unlikely opponent can leave us in defeat. And sometimes the victors of war are not men, but birds. And that was the unbelievable story of the Great Emu War. But here's the thing, this channel isn't just about me telling stories. It's about us, building a community together, like a family that loves to uncover the strange, the forgotten, and the fascinating pieces of history. I'd really love to hear what you think. Was this story more tragic, hilarious, or maybe a mix of both? And even more, do you have a strange true story you'd like me to cover in a future video? Your ideas and voices are what make this channel alive. So drop your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. I promise, I read them all. And if you haven't already, join our family by hitting subscribe and turning on the notification bell, so you'll always be here with us when the next incredible story comes to life. Because this isn't just my channel, it's ours. And together, we're bringing history's strangest tales back into the light.